And welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. Got a packed program for you today. A little later, our El Paso correspondent Julian Resendiz is going to be joining us to tell us about some new reporting about some interesting things involving the discovery of bodies and remains in the state of Sinaloa on the other side of the border, as well as talking about some drone attacks that have been popping up on the border between New Mexico and Mexico. And a little later in the newscast, we're going to be speaking with our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, to talk about all things, that's right, the big game, Super Bowl, specifically the halftime show with Bad Bunny, the performer for this year's Super Bowl halftime show. So looking forward to that conversation as well. But first, as always, we're going to begin today's program by taking a look at what's trending across the border. Starting with county commissioners in eastern Pennsylvania learned that ICE paid $120 million to buy the former Big Lots warehouses in Tremont Township. According to the county commissioners, the facility will house 7,500 people for up to 3 months. The federal government will also hire anywhere up to 2,500 people to operate the detention center. For area residents, there are mixed reactions. And having a slight technical difficulty there, but one resident says that she's very angry and does not like it. She's also scared. She says her husband is black and she thinks that they are looking for people of color. Another man said they're doing their job in reference to ICE, saying it's just like other people who have jobs to do. They have jobs to do, and that people ought to, instead of protesting, let them do their job. U.S. Senator John Fetterman, who represents Pennsylvania, sent a letter over the weekend to Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem on Saturday, expressing his concern in opposition to the warehouse purchases. Long stays in detention centers have become more common in President Donald Trump's second term. In part, that's because a new policy generally prohibits immigration judges from releasing detainees while their deportation cases wind through backlogged courts. For the first time, the number of people in ICE custody has topped 70,000. 10% of those detainees have been in custody for at least 6 months, nearly 80 held for more than 2 years. The Supreme Court ruled in 2001 that Immigration and Customs Enforcement cannot hold immigrants indefinitely, finding that 6 months was a reasonable cap. In other news, immigration activists and attorneys say they have received a number of reports of federal agents impersonating construction workers, delivery drivers, and in some cases, anti-ICE activists in the state of Minnesota. Not all of those incidents have been verified during the ongoing immigration crackdown, but they have spread fear in a state already frightened by the ICE raids and deaths of 2 Americans by federal agents. Supporters of the crackdown say there are so many anti-ICE activists in Minneapolis that federal agents have been forced to adopt new methods of avoiding detection. Mexican authorities announced the discovery of bodies and remains in the northwestern state of Sinaloa in an area of an ongoing search for 10 missing workers from a Canadian gold and silver mine. I wanted to bring in our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendiz, now to bring us up to speed on what's going on there. Julian?
Rudy, as you may remember, a few days ago, we learned of the shocking disappearance of 10 people from the premises next to a Canadian operated silver mine in the state of Sinaloa. What we know about Sinaloa, like what we have been telling you guys about Sinaloa, is that that's the base of the Sinaloa cartel, whom the U.S. government calls the most prolific exporter to the U.S. of fentanyl. There has been an ongoing war within the Sinaloa cartel ever since one of the factions, one of the sons of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who's the co-founder of the cartel, allegedly kidnapped his father's associate, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, put him on a plane and brought him to the U.S., and both of them surrendered. Now, because of that, a very large number of people, now we're going close to 2,000 people, have lost their lives in that cartel war. That cartel war has extended to businesses. There's been a lot of as far as businesses involved. Now, what happened here is that the mine itself, the Mexican employees of the mine called the authorities and told them some people have been abducted from the immediacy of the mine. So when the authorities got there, they discovered that there were 10 people missing. Although the missing are presumed to be employees or contractors of the mine, we have not gotten confirmation either that they are direct employees, contractors, or their nationality. However, the latest developments are that the Mexican government has told the local news media, yes, these are some of the 10 missing people, and they do have a connection to the mine site. This is a very troubling discovery because the Mexican government a few days ago sent 1,600 soldiers to look for these 10 missing workers with the hope of finding them alive. If they were held captive, to liberate them. If they had been released, to locate them. Now, the fact that they found some cadavers does not bode well for the other 7 missing persons.
Julian, you've been covering, this kind of stuff here on the border for a very long time. What kind of message does this send to businesses and business owners in other countries that may want to expand their operations south of the Rio Grande and south of the U.S.-Mexico border?
This is very troubling for anybody doing business in Mexico, whether they are Mexican companies or U.S. or in this case, Canadian companies. If I'm the business owner, immediately what comes to mind, well, what kind of liability did this place me in? Even if those the missing were contractors, there is still a connection. Now, the other thing that we have to take into account is that the message this event sends is that nobody is safe in certain portions of Mexico. That is the underlying message. You may be out there doing a job, a legitimate job, and whether you have anything to do with criminals, run-in, or any kind of incident, you run a risk of falling prey to the violence that is engulfing this state of Sinaloa.
I know here, it's interesting that you say that nobody is safe because we've seen here in Tamaulipas, for example, a level 4 travel warning: do not travel for any American citizens, obviously, including people that work at the U.S. Embassy and things like that. But it seems like this is becoming more of a common thing here in these border states, which we didn't really see over the last couple years.
Yeah, what this means is that Americans or visitors are not specifically targeted, but it means that Americans, Canadians, anybody in certain areas of Mexico is liable to fall prey to collateral damage. That is, the cartels doing their thing, doing their killing, doing their extortion, approaching, whether it's approaching businesses for extortion or just grabbing people that are, just cross their path. That's what I mean when I say that nobody's safe. And yes, it is. This is something very troubling. And in the state of Sinaloa, for the past year and a half, nobody has been safe.
Thank you, Julian. You've got some other reporting that's very troubling as well, and that's cartels using drones to attack near the U.S. New Mexico, specifically New Mexico border.
Yes, Rudy. Let me tell you what happened. Last year, I covered a binational meeting between officials from the state of New Mexico and officials from the Mexican northern border state of Chihuahua. And they have a common problem. The common problem is that organized crime on the Mexican side is increasingly using drones for all kinds of illicit activity. Primarily, we're talking about surveillance of the movements of the Mexican army along the border. And recently, since we had the great migration surges of 22, 23, and 24, also to use the drones to be like scouts for their smuggling operations. Now, things went wrong last year in the state of Chihuahua, when for the first time, the cartels used a drone to attack the Mexican army. And that attack was documented, and it sent shockwaves to every border officials on both sides of the border wall. So with this in mind, the Chihuahua State and New Mexico State officials met, and they discussed what can we do to prevent an incursion. In New Mexico, it hasn't happened yet, but they are concerned because it only takes one instance for things to go wrong. They are concerned about the possibility of misuse of drones, drones coming over the border, or even on this side, if associates of the cartels on this side utilize the drones for either surveillance or more nefarious things to do. So the officials from both sides expressed support for each other, expressed mutual cooperation, and in the case of New Mexico, The New Mexico legislature right now is evaluating a state bill, a state law to criminalize the illicit use of drones. Establish, okay, what constitutes an illicit use of drones. The proposal is, well, if those drones fly anywhere close to critical infrastructure, water plants, electrical plants, or government institutions such as prisons or police stations, then that would be a crime. We want to criminalize it. And that's what they're debating right now. And that proposal got a boost with this binational meeting in which both officials from both sides of the border say, we need to rein this in.
And just to give a little context to the folks at home, when I, excuse me, when I started reporting here in the Rio Grande Valley nearly a decade ago, one of the first stories that I did was in Roma, Texas, which is in Starr County. It's our westernmost county here in the Rio Grande Valley of the 4 counties in South Texas. And the story was about lasers essentially coming from Miguel Alemán right across the Rio Grande being pointed at police officers with Roma PD and Border Patrol agents and other law enforcement officers that patrol that area of the Rio Grande. And what's interesting about those lasers is that they were standing still. They were pointed right at where they wanted to be without dancing around. Now, I don't know if you've ever used a laser pointer for fun, but it's hard to keep that thing still without being on some kind of tripod, which kind of alludes to the fact that maybe these were weapons-mounted laser pointers. If it's that easy for a laser pointer to be used or a weapon potentially to be aimed at law enforcement from across the Rio Grande, it's kind of terrifying to think what could be done with a drone attack, because at least with those laser sights, it kind of gives you a heads up that somebody from somewhere is watching you at a minimum, seeing what you are trying to do. And so the thought of these things just flying over real quick, potentially attacking or dropping something like we've seen in Ukraine, I think that is pretty concerning for most officials all along the U.S.-Mexico border.
Yes, Rudy, the potential for great harm is there. And we have spoken to security experts, international security experts, and they tell us, yeah, it's just a matter of time before the Mexican cartels step up their technology. Right now, we're still talking about primarily commercially available drones that are being used. The drone attack that I told you in Chihuahua was carried out with a not very sophisticated drone, but it's only a matter of time before that becomes a real threat. And let me tell you, the one thing right now, that has kept Mexican criminals from attacking north of the border is this sort of gentleman's agreement south of the border. Don't do things that are going to put attention on all of us. However, you can question how far is a gentleman's agreement gonna take us when we're not talking about gentlemen, so to speak.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your reporting today, Julian. We appreciate you being here. El Paso correspondent Julian Resendiz joining us this afternoon. Stick around, though, because when we come back, we're going to bring in our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, to talk about everything. Well, not necessarily everything, but the big talk about yesterday's Super Bowl, and that is the halftime show with Bad Bunny. So stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. And welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles here in Harlingen, Texas. So if you watched last night's Super Bowl halftime show, you may have thought that the child featured with Bad Bunny was Liam Ramos, the Ecuadorian boy who was taken by ICE agents last month. Now, a lot of folks thought that it was Liam. You'll see him come across your screen here momentarily, but published and broadcast reports say it was not him. Instead, the child featured was Lincoln Fox, a half Argentinian and half Egyptian child model and actor. Again, you'll see him come across your screen here in just a moment. Right now, you've got Ricky Martin, who was one of the several celebrities. Here we go. This is the young child. You see Bad Bunny actually come up to him and hand him the Grammy, and that is the boy in question. But again, that is not Liam Cornejo Ramos. It is a child actor named Lincoln Fox. And that kind of brings us in now to our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera. Salvador, we talked about the Super Bowl a little bit on Friday, about everything that was going to be happening, all the expectations from this. What do you got for us?
Well, we thought the show was going to be big. It's going to draw huge numbers, and it certainly did. And we in the news industry, when we have our editorial meetings, we always talk about, well, what are people talking about? Perhaps that is something we need to concentrate on. And this is why we're talking about it here on Border Report Live, because it was such a huge spectacle. The game almost did not matter. So I don't have the score for the game, but I can tell you what the score was for the halftime shows. 135 million people watched Bad Bunny's halftime Super Bowl show. It is the highest rated ever halftime show. On the other hand, the Turning Point USA event featuring Kid Rock drew 61 million people. That is according to the New York Times. The 135 million figure is from CBS News. So quite a discrepancy. Nearly 2/3 of everybody watching something at halftime for the Super Bowl was tuning in to see Bad Bunny and his guests, because there was a lot of others. We saw Ricky Martin. We saw Jessica Alba in the stands, Pedro Pascal, Cardi B. We also had Lady Gaga perform her hit song Die With a Smile, but to a salsa beat, which was fantastic. My wife and I were watching, and we were just in awe. It was such fun, amazing to see this Latino talent, Latino flavor, Latino pride really stand out during the show. And it's got everybody talking about it. Social media was a buzz. Our family members, we all started texting one another. And one of the items of conversation was Liam. Was it Liam Ramos? We all thought it was, and now we know otherwise. But it was certainly a lot of fun to watch. It was quite a spectacle, and I think this country was perhaps not ready for it, but I think it certainly proved its mettle. It proved that we belong. It proved that perhaps love is more powerful than anything else. In fact, that was one of the themes in the show, with the wedding, the first kiss, the wedding kiss, and that was an underlying theme of the event, was that Trump, love will trump everything else, no pun intended.
You know, one of the things you mentioned was Lady Gaga, and just kind of hearing how, there's been some talk, a little bit of talk online, speaking of what is everyone talking about. And the talk is, what was Lady Gaga doing there? But when I've been talking to folks, not just, around town, people I know, texting with folks last night, but even here in the newsroom, someone right before we came on air, they were talking about it, and someone referred to her. She is now Tia Gaga to everyone who's going to be, who watched last night's show. So it was an interesting choice, but like you said, it was just an incredibly star-studded event, but it also featured some small-time names that people maybe outside of Los Angeles or Southern California don't know. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up a quick still here from last night's image. Now, a Los Angeles-based taqueria made a guest appearance during the Super Bowl halftime show last night, putting an even larger spotlight on the restaurant already loved by Angelinos. Vias Tacos and Chef Victor Vias were featured as a Puerto Rican singer Bad Bunny performed Titi Me Preguntó right at the very beginning of his performance last night during the halftime show, while he walked through what looked like sugarcane fields meant to mimic his home country. On Instagram, Villa said he is a first-generation Mexican-American born and raised in L.A. He said it was an honor to represent his raza and all the taqueros of the world by bringing his cart to Bad Bunny. Villa said he sold his first taco 8 years ago in front of his grandma's house. And right before we came on the air, you were actually making a phone call. Tell us a little bit about that.
We were trying to figure out how busy they were. We also reached out to our counterparts up at KTLA to see if they were doing a story on Villa's Tacos, because you would imagine with such publicity that they were going to be inundated with people for lunch and perhaps onto the dinner hour. We couldn't get through. We got a recording talking about how they don't sell anything online. Everything has to be ordered in person at the restaurants. We know they have 3 franchises now. They have just blown up. They're incredibly tasty tacos. I have not had them, so I cannot make that claim, but I'm told that they are probably the best in all of Los Angeles. So, and Bad Bunny reached out, and they went up there and were part of the show. And of course, Bad Bunny was trying to integrate portions of Puerto Rico, Latin America, that a lot of Latinos ourselves tend to congregate with: the barbershop, the manicurists, taco shops. We play dominoes. So that's what he was trying to do, to get some of the Latin life out there for mainstream America to see and experience. And it was certainly well taken. But I must add, not everybody liked it. I do want to share with you what President Trump said about the show. And this is him. This is a quote from his social media. "The Super Bowl halftime is absolutely terrible. one of the worst ever. It makes no sense. It's an affront to the greatness of America and doesn't represent our standards of success, creativity, and excellence. Nobody understands a word this guy is saying. And the dancing is disgusting, especially for young children that are watching from throughout the United States and all over the world. Lastly, he said, this show is just a slap in the face to our country. Again, that is from President Trump, but makes you wonder if he was critical of the show, perhaps he was watching and not watching the Kid Rock event on social media.
Yeah, on our 4 p.m. newscast here at valleycentral.com, one of the things we do is called the Comment Now. And we bring up people's comments from social media. We ask them to comment now at the beginning of our newscast, and we also look at what's already been commented. And that's kind of how we pick what we're gonna kind of feature for that story, is seeing what's already generating buzz, so we can get people interacting with our newscasts in real time, and again bring their comments on air so they can be part of the newscast. And it was interesting that everybody, pretty much, I would say 90% of the hundreds of comments that we had on that post already said, oh, so he wasn't watching the Kid Rock show. He was watching Bad Bunny. People were even posting videos of President Trump at Mar-a-Lago last night during his Super Bowl party watching Bad Bunny live. So that was interesting to see, as well, as you mentioned there. I got to ask you, before we head into a break, my favorite part of the show, and I think it's a lot of folks that are sitting behind me here in our newsroom here in Harlingen, one of my favorite parts was seeing the little boy sleeping while everybody was dancing. He was on those chairs, and it was reminiscent of my times going to a boda or a quinceañera or something when I was a young boy, being like, oh man, I'm ready to go to sleep, passing out, and then my parents waking me up with all the music going on around me. Hey, it's time to go, let's go. So what was your favorite part of last night's halftime show?
That was fun. I really loved Lady Gaga's performance to their song, to the salsa beat. It was just a different way to sing that amazing song, to show off her amazing talent. I really liked at the end when we had the parade of all the flags from Central and North America, the Caribbean. I think that sent a really powerful message that we're all here, we're all part of America. And then remember, Bad Bunny did say he praised America, God bless America. He made it part of his show as well. The American flag was certainly featured prominently. So I do hope that this message carries on, and perhaps people become more inclusive and more tolerant of all of us Latinos who live in the United States and appreciate what we do and how we do contribute to the greatness of this country.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your reporting, Salvador. We appreciate you joining us today. San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera joining us to talk about last night's halftime show, Super Bowl halftime show with Bad Bunny. If it's a big sporting event that involves cross-border culture, you can expect Salvador to be reporting on it. All right. Well, stay with us. Got a few more headlines when we come back. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. Got a few more headlines before we leave you for today. Starting with Nicaragua's government is blocking Cuban citizens from entering without a visa, cutting off a key migration route to the United States. The government confirmed this change over the weekend, suspending an exemption that allowed Cubans to enter visa-free. For years, Cubans flew to Nicaragua to meet smugglers who helped them travel north. Experts say Nicaragua has used this to challenge the U.S. The change comes after pressure from the Trump administration on Latin American nations regarding migration and security. With U.S. asylum access reduced, Cuban migrants face new barriers. Guyana remains an alternative route, though it is a very much more difficult path. And a little bit lighter news to leave you today. One of the most popular snacks for Latin Americans is Takis. And today they've announced 6 new flavors starting today. The flavors will go from zero heat to the super spice. You can see the bar right there to let you know how hot they get as they go along. Now, the new flavors include extreme lime, smoke and barbecue, jalapeno, which is described as hot. Plus, there's pickle punch. That's really more my flavor right there. Crazy buffalo. And finally, hot honey, one I am willing to try. I always love something sweet, even if it's got a little kick to it. Takis like to add that their snacks are made without artificial colors. Before we go, wanted to remind you that you can stay informed on the stories shaping the U.S.-Mexico border while you're on your commute home, walking the dog, or maybe you're getting a workout in the gym, as the Border Report Live brings you real-time updates, expert insights, and voices from both sides of the border in podcast form. You can listen now on any of the apps you see listed at the bottom of your screen. That's going to do it for us today. For Julian Resendiz in El Paso, Salvador Rivera in San Diego, my name is Rudy Mireles here in Harlingen. We'll see you next time.